tonight. In separate meetings back-to-back with the leaders of Korea's major labor groups, President Moon Jae-in calls for their support in improving the economy and to return to dialogue with management and government. In the latest policy briefing session, South Korea's unification, defense and foreign ministries outlined their plans for the year. They center around building on the Olympics' peaceful momentum. Torchbearers of the PyeongChang Winter Games flame continue their relay. The latest route brings them closer to the unification bridge through which North Korean Olympic participants will enter South Korea. News Center begins now. It's 8 p.m. here in Korea, coming to you live from our studio in Seoul. This is Arirang News Center. Welcome to our program. I'm Daniel Choi. President Moon Jae-in invited the leaders of South Korea's two umbrella labor unions to Cheongwadae. During the meeting, he urged them to return to tripartite talks with management and the government. Hwang Ho-jun has our top story.
The South Korean leader called for labor, management, and government to join forces to fix issues in the job market and the wider economy. The changes needed, he said, include shorter working hours, more flexibility from labor, and a higher minimum wage.
President Moon called labor leaders key partners in managing state affairs and stressed that meeting them is only natural. He said tasks such as reducing working hours and building a society that respects labor require the support of both labor and management. And he asked his guests to help produce tangible results through tripartite dialogue at an early date.
President Moon made those comments as he met separately with the leaders of two umbrella labor organizations, the Federation of Korean Trade Unions, or FKTU, and the Korean Confederation of Trade Unions, or KCTU. It was a second visit to the Blue House by the FKTU. At Friday's luncheon with them, even the food had some meaning. Among the dishes served was samap, a traditional delicacy. It's a dish with three elements: fermented fish, slices of steamed pork, and kimchi, which come together harmoniously and symbolize the need for the three-way dialogue the president suggested. Following the luncheon meeting with the FKTU, President Moon met with the smaller but more progressive umbrella organization, the Korea Confederation of Trade Unions. The KTCU was invited to the Blue House back in October along with the FKTU, but refused to go, demanding a meeting with the president one-on-one. According to the Blue House, Friday was the first time in 11 years the leadership of the KCTU set foot on the Cheongwadae grounds. Congratulating the KCTU's newly appointed leadership, the president pledged to try and meet with labor leaders as often as possible in whatever format. The Blue House confirmed the KCTU leaders also agreed to the necessity of social dialogue. As a preparatory step to restore the tripartite talks, President Moon asked the leaders of the unions to take part in a meeting of representatives of management and government within the month, a meeting now being planned by the government. Hwang Ho-jun, Arirang News.
The South Korean government is seeking to use the Winter Games as the turning point towards peace on the peninsula. This comes as part of a policy briefing on the nation's diplomatic and security issues for the year 2018. Kwon Jang-ho fills us in on what was highlighted during that session.
From Pyeongchang to peace. That's the theme of this New Year's diplomacy and security policy briefing handed in to Prime Minister Lee Na-yeon on Friday. Due to North Korea's involvement, next month's PyeongChang Winter Olympics has become the focus of this year's agenda, with Seoul hoping to use it as a platform to improve inter-Korean relations.
Through the successful hosting of the PyeongChang Winter Olympics, we must try and reach for peace on the Korean peninsula. Our government and the international community must use its wisdom on this small but precious opportunity.
The Unification Ministry pledged to use the momentum from the Games to try and engage North Korea further with regular high-level meetings. The aim, it said, would be to eventually lead to talks to dismantle the North's nuclear program. The ministry also said it will continue to attempt a resumption of exchanges such as separated family reunions as well as humanitarian aid, both of which have failed to materialize despite efforts by Seoul in the past few months. Meanwhile, the Foreign Ministry said it will use the Olympics to foster the international community's understanding of the situation on the Korean Peninsula and Seoul's efforts to engage with the regime. The ministry also outlined plans to encourage dialogue between the US and North Korea to create a positive cycle of talks. The Culture and Sports Ministry also said that after South and North Korea agreed to make a joint entrance at next month's Olympics, it will push for similar entrances at other international sporting events, such as the Jakarta Asian Games in August. During Friday's policy briefing, government officials are said to have pointed out that North Korea have so far shown no signs that they're willing to give up their nuclear weapons and that talks may stall after the Olympics. But the Moon administration has said that doesn't mean that they're not going to keep trying. 권장호, Arirang News.
Staying with the policy briefing, the Defense Ministry vowed to improve the military's capability to protect the nation. Also on the agenda, thorough discussions with Washington for a swift wartime operational control transfer. Woo Jung-hee has the details.
In 2018, South Korea will continue to keep a firm military readiness against threats from North Korea. It'll further strengthen its alliance with the United States while working to upgrade its own independent defense capabilities. Laying out goals for the new year on Friday, South Korea's defense ministry announced it'll increase its annual budget for 2018 by over 14% to roughly $517 million. That's mainly to speed up the establishment of the country's three-pillar defense system that consists of the kill chain system, the Korea Air Missile Defense, and the Korea Massive Punishment and Retaliation Systems. They can detect movements of weapons and troops all over North Korea, including its missiles, target the regime's military headquarters, and protect key facilities in the south. The South Korea military will also continue to gear up for the transfer of wartime operational control back as soon as possible from Washington to Seoul. The allies will work together on forming a new combined forces command and measures to jointly defend South Korea after the OPCON transfer. As for Pyongyang this year, defense officials expect it'll continue its nuclear and missile programs to deter what the regime sees as threats from the U.S. The U.S. and South Korea, in their own deterrence move, plan to deploy U.S. strategic assets on a regular basis to the Korean peninsula. Seoul also hopes to restore or expand military interaction with three other powers in the region: China, Japan, and Russia. More cooperation is also sought with Australia and India, as well as Southeast Asia. But above all else, for the time being, the priority for the Defense Ministry is the peaceful and safe hosting of PyeongChang Winter Olympics next month. To prevent any type of terror incidents during the Games, the South Korean military will be checking security at PyeongChang and upping its terror alert level. Woo Jung-hee, Arirang News.
Ever since the Kaesong Joint Complex shut down some 2 years ago, the Inter-Korean Transit Office appeared abandoned, unable to serve its purpose. Fast forward to today, that gateway was bustling with people taking part in the Olympic torch relay. Lee Ji-won files us this report from Paju.
The fifth and final theme of the 2018 PyeongChang Olympic Torch Relay, Peace, began on Friday at the northern city of Paju, located next to South Korea's border with North Korea. The special torch relay started with a ceremony in front of the Inter-Korean Transit Office, where a mass bike parade of 750 volunteers and members of the Korea Cycling Federation gathered to accompany the torch. The number of participants symbolizes the 75 million people living on the Korean peninsula, and the bike wheels each represent South and North Korea, conveying the message that the two must work together to move forward.
It's a real honor to be a part of the PyeongChang Winter Olympics, and I'm really thrilled to be passing through our country's northernmost region with other bike lovers. I hope for the reunification of the two Koreas.
And with the latest talks between the two Koreas, the relay route, especially the Unification Bridge, holds even more meaning, as it is across this bridge that the North Korean participants will be entering the South for the PyeongChang Olympics. The bridge is one of the few official overland travel routes used to cross the inter-Korean border and is normally off-limits to civilians. The theme Peace comes at a highly significant timing as ties between the two Koreas have begun to thaw, with Seoul and Pyongyang holding talks for the first time in 25 months. The torch will now head east and light up the other northernmost regions of South Korea, including Cheollon, Inje, and Gosang over the next 7 days. With relations between the two Koreas showing signs of thawing, there are hopes that this torch relay and other various efforts will help make the 2018 PyeongChang Winter Games truly a peace Olympics. 이지원, Arirang News, Paju.
It's now looking likely Pyongyang will participate in 4 different sporting events at the Winter Games. They plan to send athletes to compete in the pair figure skating, women's ice hockey, alpine skiing, and cross-country skiing. According to Lee Hee-bum, the head of South Korea's organizing committee for the Global Games, that agreement was reached during Wednesday's working-level inter-Korean talks. But the final decision on which events North Koreans will participate in and the size of the joint ice hockey team roster is expected to be made on Saturday at the IOC headquarters in Switzerland. As for the unified women's ice hockey squad, the International Olympic Committee will review the agreement and determine the size of the roster. The fact that both Koreas will be in Switzerland to join in that meeting reflects their devotion to the cause. Won Jung-wan zooms in on what will be a desirable outcome.
The decision by South and North Korea earlier this week to form a joint women's ice hockey team for the Winter Olympics could turn out to be a milestone in sporting exchanges between the two countries. It certainly grabbed headlines around the world. In an email interview with Voice of America on Friday, the International Ice Hockey Federation expressed support for the joint team as a reflection of the Olympic ideal of social development and peace through sports. But a joint team could mean extra players, which has been controversial. And on that issue, the ice hockey governing body wouldn't comment, saying it will wait until the International Olympic Committee has made its final decision. That decision will come at a meeting this Saturday in Switzerland between South and North Korea and the IOC. South Korea hopes it won't have to cut anyone to add a few North Koreans to its 23-member roster. But allowing only the Korean team to have extra players is seen by many as unfair.
The purpose for the joint team means a lot for peace between the two Koreas, but in terms of breaking the existing rules of a sport, I think it could be a very dangerous decision.
If the team is expanded from the original 23 players, the IOC and the ice hockey governing body will have to seek the understanding of other countries, which might not be forthcoming. Switzerland's Ice Hockey Federation, for example, said Wednesday that expanding the roster for a joint Korean team would not only be unfair, but would distort the competition.
The rules say 23 players on each team. Considering that fairness is one of the most important aspects of sports, if there are 5 or 6 more players joining from the north, the International Ice Hockey Federation is likely to oppose that.
Whether the joint team is bigger or not, North Koreans joining would mean that South Korean players get less time on the ice, or could even be booted off the team after having prepared for the Olympics for years. There are only around 20 days left before the Olympic Games kick off, so whether the IOC decides on Saturday, the team will have to make their arrangements quickly. Won Jung-wan, Arirang News.
It's been a turbulent week for the cryptocurrency market, sudden fall in prices following dramatic gains in the past months. As such, investors are on an emotional roller coaster ride every minute. Kim Mo-gyun takes a closer look into the side effects they experience nowadays.
Bitcoin blues and Bitcoin hysteria. These new terms reflect the feelings of cryptocurrency investors. As Bitcoin's value moves up and down, it's causing anxiety, stress, and depression to many people who invested in virtual currency. December saw unbelievable gains for cryptos, drawing in millions of Korean investors. But the market's also seen some huge declines, caused in part by the Korean government's announcements of regulations, and that's got investors lurching between despair and relief. Tens of thousands of people have posted online lamenting their losses. Many of the posters are young adults holding out hope for a payday that will change their lives.
I invested money because lots of people said they earned a lot, but since prices are falling, I feel gloomy. I'm pregnant, but I can't go to sleep because I keep looking at the price on my smartphone.
There is no one reason for the crypto market's heart-stopping volatility, but it's generally agreed that a lot comes from speculation and not the real value of the coins as an asset. Prices routinely jump several-fold in a matter of days. This keeps investors constantly checking their investments, thrilled one minute, anxious about an epic crash the next. A psychology expert says this phenomenon is especially evident in Korea, where she says there's a tendency to focus on quick returns because of uncertainty Koreans feel, not just in their personal lives, but in the future of their country.
People tend to feel angry when they feel that they are the only ones losing when others are making profits. They may think that nothing good is happening in their lives, and this can also lead to depression. I think this is more evident in Korea because of the instabilities caused by the threats coming from North Korea, the shift in political power, and concerns over economic recession.
The expert said people who've lost money should realize that now is a time to make sure the damage doesn't also become psychological. She recommended that investors try to focus on other activities to keep their mind off crypto's ups and downs and turn to their families and friends for emotional support. Kim Mo-kyan, Arirang News.
Pyongyang made a sudden announcement today that it would like to conduct inspections ahead of the scheduled performances down here in South. A team will travel to Seoul and Gangneung to do more than just check out the venues and facilities. Kim Myung-gil outlines what's on their itinerary.
The spotlight is on Hyun Song-wol, who will be leading the 7-member inspection team in its 2-day trip to South Korea. She is known to be the leader of the all-female band called the Moranbong Band. The Moranbong Band was first unveiled in 2012 and is considered Kim Jong-un's favorite. It often features Western-style music and outfits. Hyun is seen as a major power player and a representative for North Korea's artists, as she was present at Monday's working-level talks. On Monday, North Korea said it would send 140 members from the Samjian Orchestra, composed of musicians, dancers, singers, and technical staff. The troupe will perform in the South Korean capital of Seoul and the city of Gangneung, Gangwon-do Province, where the ice events of the Winter Olympics will take place. The North wants to enter the South using the Gyeonggi Line train, which crosses the western part of the inter-Korean border. On the first day, it is likely that the inspection team will take a look at the performance venues in Seoul, and on the second day, tour the venues in the city of Gangneung. Once they're here, it is likely that the two sides will iron out specific details of when to put on the performances and at what time the North events will take place. They plan to perform once each in Seoul and Gangneung. Kim Myung-gil, Arirang News.
The Hermit Kingdom's willingness to talk and join in the Winter Games celebration signals a welcome thaw in inter-Korean relations. But some analysts, including Bruce Klingner, expressed concerns and even warned that the Olympics won't be a cure-all. Kim Hye-sung sat down with the former CIA deputy chief for Korea.
A thaw in frosty relations. Resumption of high-level inter-Korean talks and an agreement Wednesday to have a joint entrance for the PyeongChang Winter Olympics under a single flag. Despite hopes that the latest developments can help ease tensions and ultimately lead to a nuclear-free Korean peninsula, some experts warn of caution. Former CIA Deputy Chief for Korea, Bruce Klingner.
Well, it has to be sincere. We've seen any number of cases where we've had sporting events or cultural events, philharmonics visiting North Korea, etc. All have come to naught in improving inter-Korean relations or moderating North Korean behavior. So, we need to be, realistic about what might happen as a result of North Korea simply arriving at the Olympics.
Especially as Pyongyang's offering of an olive branch to Seoul comes just weeks after a series of nuclear threats and missile launches. And there are concerns that the North is trying to drive a wedge between South Korea and its allies like the U.S. as sanctions are starting to take a bite on the regime. How to keep the dialogue momentum going beyond the Olympics?
Well, there has to be reciprocity. So North Korea has already articulated a long list of demands that Seoul must provide. And South Korea should make those conditional and also provide their own list.
That list, including reunions of separated families, as agreed on in the 2000 Inter-Korean Summit. and a continuation of Seoul-Washington joint military exercises which have been postponed for the Winter Games, as emphasized by U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, as a measure of deterrence.
The object of negotiations, if and when we get there, is the complete, verifiable, and irreversible denuclearization of North Korea. Let me be clear, we will not allow North Korea to drive a wedge through our resolve or our solidarity.
Just as 20 countries welcomed the détente between the two Koreas at the Vancouver Foreign Ministers meeting, yet called on the need for continued sanctions and pressure to denuclearize the North.
I think we have to realize that it's a long-term issue. We need deterrence and containment and pressure and work towards long-term regime change as opposed to some near-term, sudden regime change through military means.
김혜성, 아리랑 뉴스.
President Moon Jae-in is hoping to leverage Pyongyang's participation in the upcoming Olympics diplomatically, but the initial excitement and positive vibe has subsided somewhat on the part of South Korean residents, mainly due to how the changes could impact the South Korean athletes at the Olympics. Cha Sang-mi examines the backlash.
The two Koreas have made great progress in their relations, with several agreements reached regarding North Korea's participation in the PyeongChang Winter Olympics. Among the topics discussed and agreed by Seoul and Pyongyang stands the decision of forming a joint women's ice hockey team, an unprecedented event in the history of the Olympic Games that has become a hot topic of discussion among South Koreans. A poll conducted on 1,000 South Korean citizens by the National Assembly and local broadcaster SBS shows that 72% of the respondents think that forming a joint ice hockey team is unnecessary. Moreover, the results show that most of the people who reacted negatively to the joint South-North team were people in their 20s or 30s.
I don't think it's the right timing since North Korea is not in good terms with anyone internationally.
I don't like the idea because some of the qualified athletes from our country will lose their chance to shine in the Games.
South Koreans in their 20s and 30s show an unfavorable stance regarding the idea of a joint team because they are concerned of the possible disadvantages for South Korean athletes. Another reason for not being in favor of the joint team is how sudden the decision was made.
Those who viewed the idea in a positive light responded with optimism.
Well, when it comes to sports, it's all about teamwork. I hope they do well.
On the decision of the two Koreas marching in together at the opening ceremony of PyeongChang Winter Olympics under a unified flag, the South Korean pollster Realmeter, commissioned by local broadcaster TBS, said that nearly 50% of 500 respondents preferred the teams to enter under their own flags, while 40.5% responded in favor of entering as one delegation.
People in their 20s and 30s are not familiar with the 9 instances when the two Koreas marched in together at various sporting events. Moreover, the ongoing provocations by North Korea since last September surely contributed to the negative opinion on the North.
Amid high expectations that inter-Korean relations are warming up and opening new roads to achieve peace and stability, seems like the public is more skeptical than hopeful on how the upcoming Olympic Games will influence inter-Korean policies in the future. Cha Sang-mi, Arirang News.
Time to turn to Michelle Bach at the Weather Center for the updates you need. Michelle, I understand we might be getting some breathable air?
Yes, Daniel. Now, as the dust dispersed, the air quality of the whole country recovered to a normal level. But unfortunately, the pollution will start to build up again and the dust concentration will increase slightly over the night. Now, with the smog expected to flow in from China, tomorrow the air quality will only get worse. Temperature-wise, we will see higher readings than the seasonal average. Now, Seoul starts the day at -1 degree Celsius, while Daegu and Busan begins at -2 and 2 degrees respectively. As for the daily highs, the mercury will break out of the negative territory and soar into the afternoon, with Seoul reaching to 6 degrees, while Gwangju and Busan making up to 9 and 11 degrees. We'll be under clear conditions during the weekend, but another cold spell is expected next week. And we'll be needing to bundle up then, but at least the poor air quality problem will be resolved. I'll leave you with the weather conditions around the world.
That's all we have for you in tonight's edition of Arirang News Center. Thank you for staying with us. Here's wishing you an incredible weekend.